Okay, picture this. A book, hundreds of pages long, filled with these gorgeous but really strange illustrations, and this beautiful flowing script. Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, here's the catch. For 600 years, nobody, and I mean nobody, not the world's best codebreakers, not top linguists, not brilliant historians, has been able to read a single word of it. Today, we're going to try and unravel the mystery of that book, the Voynich Manuscript.
And I'm not exaggerating here. Seriously, ever since it was made, way back in the 15th century, this book has been this object of total fascination and, honestly, complete confusion. It's like a lock that every genius has tried to pick, but the key just doesn't seem to exist.
So, the big question is, what is this thing? I mean, what are we really looking at here? Is it a language nobody's ever seen before? Some kind of unbreakable code? Or is it just the most beautiful, elaborate piece of gibberish ever made? That's exactly what we're going to try to figure out.
First up, a little intro to this enigma. Right now, the manuscript lives at Yale University's B'nai Library. And what it is a 15th century codex, a handwritten book from way before printing presses. It's made of vellum, that's animal skin, and it's packed with this totally unique, unknown script and illustrations that are, well, they're just as weird as they are stunning.
So if you could open it up, what would you see? Well, the whole thing is split into these different sections, and each one is kind of stranger than the last. You've got the herbal section, with over 100 drawings of plants, except no one can identify them. They just don't match any known species. Then there's an astronomical section, full of charts of the sun, moon, and stars, but again, they don't quite line up with what we know. The weirdest part, though, has to be the balneological section. It's got all these little drawings of nude figures bathing in this weird green goo that's flowing through these crazy-looking tubes. And then you've got cosmological maps, pharmaceutical drawings, and even pages that look like recipes. It's a lot. All right, so when you're faced with a puzzle this old and this weird, where do you even begin? Well, you start with the basics. You look at the object itself. We're going to turn to some hard science here to cut through all the myths and just figure out what we actually know for sure. And this brings us to the first big question you probably have. Could it all just be a modern fake? I mean, the guy who rediscovered it in 1912 was a book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich. Maybe he just cooked the whole thing up to sell the ultimate rare book, right? It's a pretty tempting theory, but science has a few things to say about that. So, back in 2009, scientists got their hands on it and did what you do with old things. They used radiocarbon dating. Think of it like a radioactive clock for anything that was once alive. See, all living things like you, me, and the animal whose skin became the book's pages absorbed this stuff called carbon-14. The moment that organism dies, the carbon-14 starts to decay, and it does so at a really predictable rate. So by measuring how much is left, you can figure out pretty accurately when that animal died. And what's cool is that the scientists were super thorough about this. They didn't just test one little corner of the book. No way. They took 4 different samples from all over the manuscript, from the herbal section, from a thicker page, and even from one of those big astronomical fold-out pages. And guess what? The results that came back from all 4 were basically identical.
And here's the number that blows the forgery theory out of the water. With a 95% probability, which is about as certain as you can get in this kind of science, the parchment was made sometime between 1404 and 1438. That's the scientific consensus. The book's materials are, without a doubt, from the early 15th century. And that one fact, it changes everything. It means there's just no way Wilfrid Voynich could have faked it. Think about it. He would have needed to find a huge stack of blank, untouched, 600-year-old animal skin, and then mix up inks that perfectly matched medieval chemistry, all to fool scientific tests that wouldn't even be invented for another 50 years. It's impossible. So the conclusion is clear. This isn't a modern hoax. It's a genuine mystery from the Middle Ages.
Okay, let's take a closer look at what's inside the book, because knowing it's genuinely this old just makes all the weird stuff in it that much more fascinating. The illustrations are really our first clue, our first peek into the mind of whoever created this thing. Just look at this page from the herbal section. At first glance, you might think, okay, it's a drawing of a plant, so what? But the longer you look, the stranger it gets. For 100 years, botanists have been scratching their heads trying to identify these things. And the verdict? Most of them just don't exist. They don't match any known species on Earth. They look like weird mashups, or maybe something straight out of someone's imagination. And it's the same story with the astronomical section. You've got these stunning, super detailed diagrams of the sun, the moon, and stars. And sure, you can pick out a few zodiac signs you might recognize, like Pisces or Taurus, but then there are all these other charts and constellations that are, well, they're completely alien. They don't match any system of astronomy we know of, from medieval times or any other.
And then you get to this. This is the so-called balneological section, which is just a fancy word for related to bathing. And by pretty much every account, it's the absolute weirdest part of the entire book. It is page after page of these tiny naked women, a lot of them with these oddly swollen bellies, all hanging out in this bizarre plumbing system of pools and tubes filled with this strange green liquid. I mean, what on earth is going on here? Is it alchemy? Some kind of weird medieval manual on women's health? Your guess is as good as anyone's.
So the artwork is totally baffling, right? It's a true historical oddity. But the text written all around these strange drawings, that's where we get to an even deeper, even bigger mystery. Is it an actual, real language? Or is it all just incredibly beautiful, elegant nonsense? All right, to even try to answer that, we have to switch gears from forensics to linguistics. For decades now, researchers have been running all sorts of statistical analyses on the text. They're trying to see if it has the hidden structure, the kind of mathematical backbone of a real language, even if we can't read a word of it. And what they've found, well, it's a total paradox. On the one hand, not a single person has ever come up with a translation that anyone can actually verify. It's completely unreadable. But on the other hand, the text has these complex statistical patterns that just scream real language. A hoaxer in the 15th century would have had to be an unbelievable genius, centuries ahead of their time, to fake that kind of deep structure. And this linguistic puzzle really boils down to two key statistical findings. And the crazy part is, they give us completely contradictory results. They literally pull the evidence in two different directions at the same time. Okay, paradox part one, the text follows something called Zipf's law. Now that sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. In any real language, like English, a few words are used all the time. Words like the and while most words are pretty rare. Zipf's law is just the mathematical curve that describes that pattern. And guess what? The Voynich Manuscript's text, Voynichise, follows that curve perfectly. On that test, it looks exactly like a real language. But then, paradox part two. There's this other measure called conditional entropy. Again, fancy name, simple idea. It's about how predictable the next letter in a word is. Like in English, if you see the letter Q, you're almost certain the next letter is going to be U. Real languages have a rich, complex mix of predictable bits and unpredictable bits. But the Voynich manuscript, it's a huge outlier. The patterns are, well, they're too simple. They're too repetitive. The letters follow each other in ways that are way more predictable than any natural language we've ever seen. So you've got words that are distributed like a real language, but are built like something totally artificial. And that paradox is the main reason this thing is still a mystery.
So where does that leave us? Science tells us the book is authentically old. Linguistics tells us the text is a complete paradox. So what are the leading theories that try to make sense of this whole thing? Let's run through the history we know and look at the big ideas.
So the book's history is spotty, to say the least. There are huge gaps. We know for sure its pages were made in the early 1400s, then poof, it shows up around the year 1600, owned by the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. A little later, in 1666, it gets sent to a famous scholar in Rome to be deciphered. He couldn't do it either. And then it just disappears. For more than 200 years, it's completely off the radar until Wilfred Voynich stumbles upon it in 1912. After that, it eventually makes its way to Yale. So, after all that, we're left with a few main theories, all of them pretty mind-bending. So, what could it be? Theory 1. It's a cipher. It's a known language like Latin or something just encoded. The problem is, if it's a cipher, it's unlike any we've ever seen. Theory 2. It's a lost natural language, one that went extinct, and this is the only copy left. Possible, but really hard to prove. Theory 3, it's an artificial language, a conlang like Esperanto or Klingon, but from the 15th century. Or, and you have to keep this on the table, Theory 4, it's just a hoax. A meaningless but incredibly sophisticated hoax, just one made 600 years ago. So in the end, we're left with the same questions people have been asking for centuries. Is it a lost language? A brilliant, unbreakable cipher? Or is it simply history's greatest, most beautiful hoax? For more than 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript has kept its secrets locked away. It's this perfect puzzle that has stumped brilliant minds for generations, and it leaves you wondering, after all this time, what are we all still missing?